All right, today I'm thrilled for our guest and our conversation. Today we're going to be getting into how do we use worship to do healing at a spiritual and emotional level. I think music is one of the most profound mechanisms for offloading shame, unburdening the soul. Song,
Mhm,
it works with the brain in such a way
mhm,
where it helps us to become more human. And I think
right,
there's a reason when we look at faith and science, they're both kind of pointing to worship, to music, and they're
mm,
both saying something. Hey, this is important. This is something that God uses to help us. It's kind of like the Sabbath, it's a gift. And I
right.
just love music. I love someone who is very equipped to help us. Our guest today is going to be, has so much to share. But more than anything, I want you to pay very close attention as we're in this interview. Those of you watching, pay very close attention to the journey that he is going to describe that he's on right now. His journey really has a lot to say, and I look forward to all of us receiving a blessing from it. Brian, welcome to the channel, my brother. I'm so grateful to have you.
Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here. I appreciate so much your work, and it's helped a lot of people and continues to help a lot of people. So thank you.
Well, yeah, we wanted to connect last year, and some things happened, and the Lord has carried you. The Lord has continued to sustain both of us and so forth, so we could meet today. But I want to just give you plenty of room to kind of tell people about your journey. I think people have little fragments, maybe they've heard something here and there, but I really wanted to kind of give a cohesive sort of story to people about your journey and what you've been on, brother.
Yeah, sure. As far as the health journey specifically, yeah. At the end of last year, we went on vacation in Evergreen, Colorado, where my wife's parents live. One of my favorite places in the world. And I was felt ill. I had been having some headaches, and I thought it was just sinuses, but I they were getting it got really intense. And one night I thought maybe I had COVID because there was a little bit of a COVID going around at that time, and so I separated myself from my wife and kids and stuff. And that night I just had really bad headaches, and but by the morning I was kind of incoherent. I was sort of rocking and chanting and in so much pain. And but then by the morning, I couldn't. Like my wife was trying to get me to take a COVID test, and I couldn't read the instructions. Um, and then I just kind of slipped into uh, not knowing what was going on. So they called the ambulance, and I had an ambulance ride, and I was vomiting. But anyway, turns out I had a tumor, a large tumor, kind of in the back of my head, and a little bit on the left side. And I had to have immediate surgery, but I was in Denver, so I had to quickly fly back here to LA, and they were able to bring the swelling down a little bit with medication, and then that began this. I had surgery to remove the tumor, and then brain surgery is really intense because your brain is important,
Mm.
and it was a really profound, a lot of profound kind of experiences even surrounding that, even with the spiritual realm and stuff that I felt like I experienced, and then just a long process of rebuilding, learning how to. Because at the beginning, after surgery, I could walk, but I really had a weird relationship to gravity, and I couldn't. I was I had trouble like kind of compartmentalizing things, and I couldn't use my computer. I couldn't really use my phone. Um, it was just a long process of rebuilding and relearning how to do stuff. And um, so now I had treatment. I had the surgery. I had chemotherapy, which I still have once a month chemotherapy, and then I wear this device called the Optune, which is these. It has all of these um, not sensors, but modules or whatever nodes, I guess, that create an electrical field in my brain. And
Mhm.
what that is doing is inhibiting tumor cells replicating. So it stops that mitosis, or slows it down anyway, so that the tumor, because what brain cancer is rapidly, what any cancer is rapidly multiplying cells, and the kind of brain cancer I have is glioblastoma, which is the most
Mm,
deadly kind of brain cancer. And so, along with that comes, the normal, the regular sort of expected from when you're diagnosed to death is usually around a year. But
mm,
I have all the signs are to being in good health. My MRIs have been good. I have
mm.
another one coming up in October, early October. So ask for prayers for that, and I'm praying
Yes.
for 20 years more. Why not?
Yeah.
So and that's not outside the realm of science, but of course, God can do anything too. So
Mhm,
the whole thing is has it reminds me of just how powerless we really are, and
mm,
of just the importance of surrender. And it wasn't that long ago, on this journey, I felt like I heard this voice, and I believe in the Holy Spirit. I believe in promptings of the Holy Spirit. I don't know, it wasn't like an audible voice, but it's obviously, if somebody hears something from God and it's contrary to Scripture, there's a problem. But
yeah.
but but what I heard is, it was really really clear, and it said, "When are you going to learn to stop worrying about things you can't control?"
Mm,
And I feel like that's something, God's been trying to teach me for a while now, through some mental health journeys of my kids, through and just challenges with my kids have been through, in their late teen years, through the pandemic, through challenges in our church, through all kinds of stuff. It's like we want control, and we don't have it. We think we do. It's just an illusion, and but we gravitate towards wanting control. So in that way, it's been good for me just to be reminded again of, just, I cannot control. There's so much I can't control, and I have to let
mhm,
go. There has to be a surrender of that, and an entrusting that to God, who does control all things. So
mm.
anyway, that's kind of uh, I probably went too long, but that's a snapshot of what the
No,
journey
you
I've done.
didn't. No,
Okay.
there's a lot of people who care and who've been praying. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
who feel connected, and the thing is I'm realizing as, after the pandemic and just becoming more aware of health issues in general, is that, it's a shared burden in many
Yeah.
ways. It's something that obviously, we have to be vulnerable with people and invite people into, but I appreciate you being willing to let people know. Some people, they kind of become very protective and sort of like, I don't want people to know. It's and
Yeah.
I just want everybody to know their health is their business. I mean,
Sure.
privacy is important. But your willingness to invite people into the journey and the story of it, I'm just grateful. And it's very
Yeah.
vulnerable to do that.
Well, I just, I'm always going, what is God doing, and how can God use this? And I mean, like you said, people around the world are praying. I mean, it's crazy to get messages from people like, I don't know you, that I don't know, but they're like, I pray for you every day, and I'm
Mm,
like, wow, that's convicting, that's humbling,
mm,
and people that take, that where my songs have comforted them through hardship or through loss, or that soul anchor for the soul. I mean, so many people have told me, like, just stories about that song, and it's just like, wow. I mean, God is it's just crazy, it's crazy. But I am so thankful for the community uh, that I'm a part of, not only here locally, but really around the world, with people who've been praying for me. So I really want anybody watching this, if you're one of those people, I just want to say thank you so
mm.
much for your prayers, and I thank you, and my family thanks you, and I know we're going to be together forever in heaven, so we'll be able
Yeah,
to talk about all this. But anyway, thank you so much.
indeed. Indeed. So your album, Wait for the Lord, My Soul, it sounds like there might be a connection to mental health. Can we take a moment to explore that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, maybe I'm trying to think the best way. I might even just talk through some of the songs on the album, but
Please. Yeah.
so I was writing. I mean, I'm always writing songs, and I may or may not release them, but I hadn't released an album for quite a while, since 2016 or something like that, and we were just busy, busy in ministry, and then when the pandemic hit, and we were in lockdown, it was actually, I mean, obviously, it was a sad time for so many who were experiencing loss, and we had people in our church who passed away, and but it
Mm,
was also kind of a, I don't want to say I enjoyed it, but
mm.
I'm an introvert, so being holed up
Yes.
and just with my family, and they're stuck with me and they can't go hang out with their friends, and we're hanging out, and we had church. We are one of the churches in our fellowship that rents churches, rents facilities. No one would rent to us. We couldn't even get anybody to rent to us a parking lot, So we were meeting in my house, or in my backyard in this garage. We kind of made like a studio,
Mm.
and we would just do all our services live in my garage, and we'd have the musicians over, and we'd have social distancing. We'd open up the garage, and then like one family group at a time would come and sit in the alley, and we would have church, and it was just such a fun thing doing church like that. And one of the things I learned is just like, because I think church had been, to me, and I think part of it is the culture of the fellowship churches that we're a part of, or just the way I grew up, was just church is loud and it's big and it needs to be bold and it's conquering and it's, do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah.
but here it's like it was so quiet, even just, I was used to as a song leader, and I came to music as a song leader, and when you're a song leader in the early 90s or whatever, you're just loud and you're just, my Lord, he done my Lord, just loud and brash, and that's okay, it's fine, but like, but now we're in this quiet space, in my garage with me and a few other singers, and it's just so quiet, and so I just learned to be quieter with my music and with singing and with songs, and it's just so like even the song "Wait for the Lord, My Soul" was written in that context, and um, it's based on Psalm 130, which is my soul waits, my whole being waits. Wait for the Lord, my soul, and like watchmen wait for the morning, and just this, a lot of the Christian faith through the centuries and God's people is a story of waiting. I mean, you think of the
Mm.
people who were in exile, and and we all love to quote that psalm, that prophecy about you know uh, that God's with you and everything, but that's on their way into exile. That
Mm.
they're going to have 70 years of of waiting. We don't always remember that part. I know the plans I have for you, plans to harm you, not to harm you, but to give you hope in the future. And we, but they had to wait, and so I think most of people of faith, it's very it's very rare to be on top, all the time. And
Mhm.
that's wouldn't even be good for us. It wouldn't be good for our souls.
Mm.
Uh, the God's people, typically it's more waiting for justice, waiting for to see God make his promises fulfilled. And he always does, and he always will. But the spiritual discipline of waiting is really important, and it's really throughout the scriptures of waiting on the Lord, waiting on God. So a lot of the songs on this album sort of have that posture of waiting, or of resting, the idea of rest. Another song that's on there is called Let Me Rest, and it's from uh, you know, the you will find rest for your souls. Matthew 10, is it? Like, one of the things with
Matthew
my
11,
scripture,
yeah.
Matthew 11, I,
Yeah.
I lose some of the numbers. I have an issue with numbers, especially right at the beginning. So some of my chapter remembrances are
Yeah.
gone. But yeah, just like, maybe I'll talk more about that. Well, maybe I should talk about it now. Just that I feel like I was given a really wrong interpretation of Matthew 11,
Hmm.
um, of where forceful men, you know what I'm talking about, like the forceful men lay hold of it. Kingdom of God is forcefully advancing, and forceful men lay hold of it. That was kind of a mantra in our family of churches, and the and so it was almost like this culture of, as an evangelist, your first job is to be forceful, like make
Mm.
it happen. And that's just not the ethic of scripture, whereas on the other hand, I mean, I never heard lessons about being temperate or um, being patient or being kind. Like kindness was almost like frowned upon. You know what I mean? Like not frowned upon, but just in our culture of ministry, to be kind was not a value. And I'm talking about a while back. People who are been around a long time, kind of what I'm talking about, the culture. But Matthew 11 is saying, they've even changed the translation. It doesn't say forceful men lay hold of it. It says the kingdom of God has suffered violence, and violent men are raiding it. And since the days of John, so Jesus is saying, that what's being said is that, you know, we're in this struggle, we're in this battle, and sometimes we suffer loss, and sometimes we have to wait for the victory, and there's violent men raiding, but we can trust in God, we can trust in Jesus, we can trust that he's got this, so uh
And
so
my apologies, that scripture, that may be in Matthew 10. Sorry, I was thinking about, Matthew 11 where it says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest, rest for
yeah,
your
and that
souls." I
follows,
thought
yeah.
that's what okay,
I am, yeah. I'm talking about the whole thing. So yeah,
gotcha.
so the name of the song is "Let Me Rest," still my soul in your embrace. So it's finding rest for my soul. How does that happen? It's through trusting in
Mm,
his goodness, and that he is the good shepherd. And Psalm 23, and he makes me lie down in green pastures. And he leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul.
mm,
I think that's even probably Jesus probably even had in mind Psalm 23, finding a rest for your soul. He
mhm.
restores my soul. That's the good shepherd. So I don't have to be this forceful man. In fact, those are the enemies of the kingdom of God. Um,
Hmm,
I, I can, I can trust. I can rest. I can. That doesn't mean we're not active for the kingdom.
yeah.
But part of how God can use us the most is if we learn to rest, if we learn to trust, if we learn to Sabbath, if we learn stillness and solitude, and so those are the kinds of lessons that I feel like I've been learning over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and a lot of this with the songs are sort of, they're coming from that space.
So, how do we describe the connection between art, music, worship, and mental health? Because this is so when I went through and got my master's, marriage and family therapy, the idea of getting a clinical license or um, a license or an education, a therapeutic education, when it came to art, and let's say using music or song, was like new and
Mm,
like barely conceptualized in many ways. But after that, now they're finding that even film can be
mm,
used therapeutically. Art, music, some of the forms of treating trauma, like sand tray therapy,
mm,
using things that really access the part of the brain that contain experience and a very visual, and so or auditory. So the different parts of the brain have different jobs, and music and art and film and all these things, they tap into that in a very very special way. It's kind of amazing how we're designed. We are brilliantly designed. We have a brilliant creator. But there is a connection. There is a connection between art, music, worship, and mental health. How have you described that connection?
um, well, I'm definitely not a mental health expert. I can just speak from my experience, and we've had challenges within my family with mental health,
Mm,
and um, I've gone to a few therapy sessions myself, um, and that was beneficial. But I just speak as I'm not, I don't, I'm not I'm a minister. I can speak in that arena.
Absolutely.
Mental health is more your arena, but I do think that for myself as a melancholy person, introverted person,
Yeah.
music is really it was a balm for me, balm for my
Mm.
soul, and just as a growing up in our church, I love the songs that we would sing, and so many of the hymns that we would sing as I was growing up, and they are sort of foundational,
Mhm.
and then I had my own songs, and I had my own, like, for me, it was, and I don't mean to alienate anybody, but I graduated '89, so for me it was this '80s music, and it was U2, because U2 was different than kind of a lot of the other hair band stuff, that
Yeah.
didn't really do it for me. But U2 is real. I mean, especially some of their early albums. I started listening to them in middle school, actually, and they have they're very it's very um, religiously informed. It's very, I mean, some of
Mhm.
the songs from the October album is just all scripture, and it's very apocalyptic, and it's but that was sort of what that was how I connected with God, and with just the world. Was really through music like that, and writing my own songs like that. So some of my early songs that I wrote are so apocalyptic, and so like I wrote this song, just about the end of time, and lots of songs about the sun is black, the sky is red, the stars are falling, the moon is dead,
Mm.
creation hears, just that, the shepherd sign is in the sky. It's called Shepherd Sign, but those are the kinds of I love just apocalyptic, just, and when you're a teenager too, you love stuff that's dramatic like that. But so music was a way to kind of help my own soul, I think, because I did tend to be negative, or tend to be see the cup half empty all the time, or whatever, just or I don't know if I dealt with real clinical depression, but just I'm down and I don't know why, or I'm
Mm.
sad for no reason, or and somehow music would just, and the Psalms, and would help me just feel better, would help me feel in a better place. And even on this last album, I have a song called uh, "Drive My Fears Away," and the song goes. Seems like I can't see who I'm supposed to be. Feels like suddenly no one here but me. And so
Mm.
just that feeling of just being alone and isolated, and nobody understands. Kind of like Elijah, where he's just,
Yeah.
I'm the only one left. That feeling.
Mhm.
And but then I pray, and then the chorus is, drive my fears away, stay with me, Lord, hear me as I pray, you promised me, Lord, you're coming back someday, forever, my Lord, so drive my fears away. So just that, because, man, fear is a real thing, and I feel like so much uh, of
Mm.
mental illness, or mental health, or, I mean, the issues are fear. It's fear, and I love how Jesus is always like, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid,
Yeah.
don't be afraid." I mean, over and over, "Don't be afraid, I fear not." And I just love that he does that for us. He can take our fears, and he doesn't always give us an immediate answer, but I feel like
Mhm.
what his answer is his presence. It's that he's there
Mm.
with us, that he is, because it's kind of like when you're a little kid, you can experience anything if your mom or dad is with you. So I think if we have that presence of Jesus with us, it makes all the difference. So anyway, that's kind of how I've learned to use music to express some of these. And it's funny, my parents, when I first started writing songs, because I was not expressive at all,
Hmm.
as like a teenager, or I was very kind of closed in. And I was an artist, so I would kind of express myself through art. But I'm sure my parents were like, "What?" Sometimes scary looking art.
Yeah, yeah.
But but then when they would hear these songs, it's like, "Oh, okay, well, there's some real deep stuff in there, and over time I learned to be more open and more expressive, but music and song became a real way for me to sort of express myself or wrestle with some of these deep things.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about before we came on to interview was how what music does in a lot of ways is music kind of takes things out of this like having to fit within this sort of tight window of comprehension, having to fit within this mold, having to fit within constraints. And what music does, I think, for a lot of people who are struggling with overwhelm, people who find themselves in a situation where they are overmatched, they find themselves heartbroken.
Yeah.
When you look at the research, it's very clear, especially when it comes to things like trauma. A lot of folks get stuck from neck up. They're
Mm.
stuck from the neck up. And what they're not able to do is really get neck down.
Yeah.
Music, number one, allows the body a lot of times. What do you listen to me when you listen to music? What do you want to do? You want to move.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Movement is part of what trauma, the body holds the story. And so
Yeah.
trauma, if you don't move it in the body, you don't move it. And so music is good because sometimes with music, it gets people moving.
Mm.
And then as we move, we express.
Yeah.
And when we express, we're communicating, which in some senses is what someone, let's say, who's in depression, like if they are in a season of depression, that starts to get shut down, their ability to communicate things. And so, what I have found as a therapist is a lot of times when we have these traditional neck up approaches in terms of modality or whatever,
Yeah.
music, art, poems, that gets all of it engaged.
Yeah.
And people can start to engage the loss of faith. They can start to move forward in terms of, okay, I can feel what surrender feels like in my body. Like, for
Mm.
instance, I'll have sometimes people be really, really tense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's release that. What's your body feel like now? Oh, I didn't real and so sometimes what I think music can do is it can give someone the beginnings of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? Because music is a powerful mechanism that helps us to understand sometimes we were feeling something, we didn't have the words because maybe there weren't words. We just
Yeah.
had 9/11, it's on Monday, the anniversary of
Yeah.
9/11. And I don't care who you are, at least if you're alive to remember it, 9/11 was a signature moment.
Yeah.
And when I have people sort of drum up that memory, it's something they can feel in their body just completely throughout,
Yeah.
like they remember it. And
Mm.
I think what music does sometimes, music's kind of like that. I think that's going to rant, but music is one of those things to where when you listen to a music, it can heal your soul, or some music, depending on what it is, can break your heart,
Mm.
or it just reveals a broken heart. Either way it goes, music is useful in
Right.
terms of engaging our emotions and our spirit. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's just a
Good.
couple thoughts I had.
No, and when you were talking, I was thinking about how the Bible allows for it has so much expression like that, raising our hands or
Mm,
falling prostrate or um did I say the right word? Sometimes sometimes I
you
say
did.
sometimes I say prostate instead of prostrate. Um that's a different thing. But um just like yeah, just learning to express and just to speak personally, I think growing up in the churches of Christ and my family is many generations back Church of Christ, which I love it. I love sometimes if I say something, I don't mean to be negative. Like I love so much the church family I'm a part of and the story I'm a part of, and I wouldn't trade it. I'm just so grateful for it. But I think it is a stream of more head up or neck up, what do you say,
Mm,
approach to theology. It's kind of like can prove why you need to be baptized, or we can prove why
mm,
this doctrine is wrong or whatever, and almost like sort of down on the emotive. I'm not saying everybody, but I feel like I grew up sort of like down on this sort of emotional approach to worship where it's like well, what were you doing on Saturday night? And now you're acting like that on Sunday, and that's
Mm.
just so, I realize, like, gosh, I am a sinner. Like, I'm the person who is like looking, I'm like the Pharisee looking at this woman who's like anointed Jesus's head with, I mean, his head, her feet, wiping her feet with her tears, and being like, yeah, kind of like, oh, does Jesus even know who this woman is? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, just God forgive me for my arrogance of
Yeah.
just, and so I've learned, and that was a process started a long time ago of just being more humble towards other expressions of worship and learning to raise my hands. I've almost got where I can do two. Usually it's just one. Once in a while I venture two. Sometimes it's just a little more like this, but that just wasn't in our culture. It's a cultural thing. I'm not saying one way of expressing is, but I think when people come from another sort of style of worship and then came into our church, I think for a while they felt so stifled. They felt like, and you don't want it to be like, pressure. Like, if you don't raise your hands, you're not really worshiping, and everybody's like condemning you. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want either. And I get where some people, I've been in church situations where, not in our fellowship, but just visiting other churches where people are falling on the ground or rolling around or doing things, or
Mhm.
barking, or I don't know,
Oh,
just,
yeah.
and I mean, it is pretty distracting, and I'm not saying that we should be doing that, and I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade on it either. It's just, uh, I'm just saying that I've learned that different people kind of connect in different ways, and so even if you don't, I think even if your own, what I love is if your church community on Sunday is really diverse. Like, that's what I think is beautiful, that people are coming from all kinds of different cultural backgrounds and
Mhm.
coming together, and you're just valuing that diversity. It's the shared love of Jesus gathering around the table of communion, and there's just a diversity there. Like, that's what I feel like it was like in the first century, and that's what I love, if we can have a gathering like that. It's not just homogeneous. It's not all people that think the same or express their worship in the same way, or, do you know what I mean? So, I'm just
I do.
I've been learning to to worship from people that are not like, didn't grow up the way I did or whatever, and
Mhm.
and learning to love it, and it's good.
So I was really hoping that we would naturally get to a question that I have, a couple questions that I have, and it just so happens that naturally
Okay.
we have. And I think that this is a question that a couple questions that I have that you are specifically equipped to lean into and actually be very helpful. So there's a couple things. In our local congregation, we've got an awesome worship band and all of that. One of the things that we've begun to do over the last couple of years is sing songs in other languages.
Wow.
And we're in Midwest Nebraska. Like, so we're in the heart of the Midwest. We're in Cornfield, Nebraska. And so, but we have, like, our church is just, it's very diverse in a lot of ways. We've got Africans, we've got African Americans, we've got a very, I mean, a growing Hispanic, um, Latino, community. Like, I mean, it's burgeoning. And so there'll be days or Sundays where we've got to have translators because we got people praying who don't speak English. I've noticed in our sort of the culture, that stuff is overwhelming for people. It's kind of like, well, wait a minute. What, I thought we are just going to sing in English.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one. So that's number one. Number two, I think that there is a pushback because of, let's say, the Hillsong culture. People are beginning to push back and say, okay, guys, turn on the lights.
Mhm.
Okay, why are we turning the lights down? That's a
Mhm.
whole thing. I could probably a whole podcast on that. But I want to get at that. And lastly, I gotta get to this while I got you. I want to get to the conscience issue that at times people have around using instruments.
Mm.
And you are brilliantly equipped because you don't just have, I mean, you have a master's, like, I didn't even go through your bio. You can read it in the description, those of you listening, but you know your stuff. And your family has tie-ins to more of the traditional streams.
Mhm.
So this idea of instrumentation has been in many ways framed as a conscience or a salvation issue.
Mhm.
Okay, so the first thing is the using different languages. The second one is turn the lights on, and thirdly is wait, you're using music?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, instruments?
Okay. That's good. My brain only lets me remember 2, so if I forget the 3rd, remind me of that one again. So, the first one was instruments or the first one was, languages? Oh, yeah.
Languages.
Yeah, you're farther along than we are. I mean, we're only as far as using Spanish in, you know, in my local congregation, but the principle, I feel like it needs to be taught again and again of valuing diversity. That's what I feel like. I like. I've always really liked an eclectic approach to. And when we say worship, worship is everything. Worship is a posture, right? Worship is
Mm,
um, giving God the honor He deserves. So we're not talking about just singing. I think sometimes we shortcut and say when we say worship, we mean the singing part of the service. I know we don't mean that. I'm just saying. I
right,
just want to acknowledge that worship is a lot more. I know you believe that, and I believe that. But sometimes when we say worship, when we're talking about the service, we're just talking about the singing part. So please forgive us
right.
for that. But we know that's not the only thing worship is. So
Yeah.
just asterisk. But I think um, I when I'm first of all, it helped when I learned or realized that whenever you because of the stream we're a part of, which is this frontier um, uh, Protestant frontier church, and then that led into this place where it's kind of driven by actually kind of driven by the record industry. I hate to say it. It's
Hmm,
kind of driven by the Christian record industry. Um, but where it's just a lot of new. I mean, when I was a kid, it's the same song. It's really rare to have a new song. It's the hymn book. It's whatever's in the hymn book. And but now it's almost like it's just flying at us the new songs, and I love it. I love the new songs, but there is sort of a one genre now of of music in a lot of churches that is the top 10, of CCLI, the
mm,
kind of the publishing world of these songs. And I don't, we can lament that or we can just go, hey, there's a lot of good messages in these songs and let's just contribute other things to it. And that's how I've tried to just be positive about that stuff and not get um, bothered by it, but just there's certain songs that would bother me or we wouldn't sing because I was bothered by it. And then eventually, okay, I give into it and okay, we'll sing it, but I still am bothered by some of the lyrics that I have a problem with theologically, but if we just teach on it, then I feel better or whatever. But, but, I think, so I think the fundamental thing though, is I think being willing to, as a church go, this is a collective and the more diverse, the better to me because we learn from each other. We learn from diversity. Jesus purposely, even though it was a Jewish community, and that's the way that even the prophets said it would be, that it would start in Jerusalem and start with the Jews. Even within Judaism, it was very diverse. It was a very diverse uh, group. You have a tax collector,
mm,
and then you have a, a zealot, which are the opposite ends of the political spectrum and even just worldview of their day. So I think as long as we celebrate diversity and then know that whatever it is that we've as a congregation talked about what are we trying to do when we gather on Sunday? Like number one, we're gathering around the table of communion. That's why we're here. We gather on the first day of the week to break bread, to remember Jesus. And then worship is why we're here. We're here to honor our God and to celebrate what He's doing in the world and to celebrate um, and to be transformed by that worship, to
Mm,
as we worship, as we commune, we become transformed, more to be like more like him. And then after, as we gather around the table and we share in this communion experience together, then we're sent out. We're sent back out into the world, and we've been transformed, we've been changed, and then we are his representatives to the world, and then we come back again. And like that's what we're doing. Like, so I think as long as we have that fundamentally, then the songs can change or the styles can change, or and they should change if we're a type of church. There's some types of churches that they're trying not to be culturally relevant, like they're trying to, like the Eastern Orthodox Church, they're trying to stay exactly the same. We're part of a stream where we're trying to be relevant, we're trying to stay, you know engaged with culture to some degree, and so that means that our style is going to change. And so always you're going to have young people wanting to sing the young songs,
mm,
old people lamenting the old songs. And do you know what I mean? You're always going to have that if you have diversity. And so we have to kind of speak to that and go, this is okay. Like, we all got to give a little, you know
yep.
we all got to give a little. We all got to, it's not, maybe the whole service won't be what you like, but just learn to love different things. I mean, I've
So let me put it let me say this real quick. Okay, so what I hear you saying, let's go back to the comment, which is fascinating, which is I can't remember the acronym, but Christian music as an industry really
Mhm,
does set a tone.
mhm,
And there's kind of a downstream culture that flows from that. But that's something we would want to look at in terms of, okay, where are we getting our cues from of what worship, quote unquote, music should look like in a service? Okay, so that's a thought. I
yeah,
might want to come back to that. The other part is that, so worship you'd mentioned is a posture. I love that. I'm going to actually use that. Um, and what that means is it's not about us.
right.
It's not about my tongue being used to worship God. It's about our hearts being used collectively. And
Mhm,
the posture that Paul says in Corinth when he's writing to the Corinthians is one body, many parts. You can't say, I don't need you. You can't say to someone else that I'm more important. And there should be order, right?
mhm,
That being said,
mhm.
now we get into the turn the lights up. So there's
Yeah,
this pushback, and again, we're dealing with different cultures, right? You've got
yeah,
an older culture, a builder generation culture. You've got a new culture that is more digitized and fast moving. There's all these different sort of confrontations going on. But turn the lights up.
mhm.
Help us decode that comment a little bit because I'm hearing it more and more.
Well, okay, so how did we get the lights turned down? It's because the church was lacking in a, a vertical connection. The church was
Mm,
it was,
hmm,
I think the church was sort of, it's about um, theological truths. It's about, doctrinal purity. Um, but this, the lights are all up, and it's we're singing, scriptural songs, and that's good. So I think we, and then when I say we, I mean all sort of American churches, I think, and or this kind of non-denominational world or whatever, kind of contemporary approach to worship, just really realized we were missing that piece of just this vertical connection to God. And I think what I think some of these churches found was, like, people are more uninhibited when they feel more anonymous. And you feel more anonymous
mm.
when the lights are down. And I've experienced that myself. The first time I raised my hands, I kind of wanted the lights to be down. uh, so, and there is something of there. It's just a um, I don't know. It's a kind of a crowd dynamics thing of there being something loud on stage, and lights, and you're in this sort of vacuous hall, and it's dark, and you feel anonymous. And I get that. That's what something that, when you say the Hillsong model, that's the Hillsong model. It's
Hmm.
huge. It's like a concert. It's like, And
Mhm.
Coldplay's another one of my favorite bands, and I've been to
Oh,
See
yeah.
Coldplay a few times, it is like a religious experience. I mean, people are the lights, the sound, the it's people love it. They're connecting, and so I think that's what people are going for. I think with that Hillsong style, but that's just to a point, you know what I mean? And so I think it's to a point, and I think the Bible also says, and in Ephesians it does say, sing and make music in your hearts to God. But then it says, speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. So I feel like there should also be a horizontal component to our gathering where we are speaking to one another and we're encouraging one another. So that might look different for each church. Where I mean, we have experimented sometimes with the lights up for certain types of songs or certain parts of the service, and then lights down for other moments, or even just a special service that's really designed to allow people that sort of vertical, in the dark kind of moment or whatever. But I think it's a good conversation to have, though. And what I love is an eclectic approach and trying different things. I love that we can have it all. We can try it all. We can try the latest Hillsong tune, but we could also sing, an ancient hymn, from like,
Yes.
400 years ago or something, you know?
So, but in terms of people having, you actually blended those really well together because that leads into the last piece, which is there are people who, and I don't know if it's a generational culture, and I don't know how long-standing conscience issues have been associated with instrumentation being used during worship, and that's more of a church history, systematic theology around it, probably that you are more aware of, but um, there are people who have a legitimate conscience strickenness if an instrument is being used because of what you just said. Now, again, I don't want to flatten the argument or
Yeah,
create a caricature out of people who hold that conscience perspective, because there are other scriptures that they would say, well, what about this? And what, it's not just make music in your hearts. That
right.
being said, this feels like a real thing for people. And then some people, I don't know how it happens, but they leave that culture and they join a culture kind of like the one that you and I are more associated with, where worship is more bifurcated. There on one hand you've got, a Hillsong whatever, and then you've got to 300-year-old traditional song used
Hmm.
in the same service without, and so I like that because that captures the hearts of
Yeah.
everyone, and but I am kind of wondering though, in terms of a biblical precedent, are instruments from a New Testament perspective prohibited?
Well, uh, so the argument is kind of going away a little bit in that it was a huge argument. You're right, and it's one of those things that gets um, it gets sort of shortcutted or oversimplified. Where that developed is so the churches in the north. Um, so this I'm talking about before, like I'm going to just talk about Restoration churches for a second. So Restoration movement, the idea of we're we're Christians only, not the only Christians. It was a unity movement. It was an idea of let's unite around the scriptures. This is the Campbellstone movement, and so it was very much a unity movement. It's trying to
Hmm.
let's unify all these different streams, and in its origins, and it's actually the first denomination in the new America, the United States of America. It's the first new denomination is the Restoration movement, and it kind of
Hmm.
came out of this Great Awakening and all that stuff. But what happened is the churches in the North had more money, and the churches in the South had less money. So the churches in the North could afford an organ, the churches in the South couldn't, and so you ended up having instrumental music North, Christian churches, non-instrumental music in the
Wow.
South, Churches of Christ. And I feel like the rationale for the textual backing for that, I think that developed later as sort of a way to fight each other. I don't I haven't studied it a lot, but it's definitely not as simple as Christian churches, Church of Christ, split over instrumental music. There's a lot more cultural things going on, as is probably
Mm,
always the case with church
mhm.
dynamics. Is there always cultural stuff? But nowadays, just I have uh, a lot of I have friends who are in the ministry in Churches of Christ, or through Pepperdine, different ministers who are, and that it's not really an issue anymore. In fact, I mean, it is with certain people, like older people in particular, and there might be young, young zealous people in the Bible Belt Church of Christ that are still really making a big deal about instrumental music, but it's not something I hear much anymore. And in fact, some of the biggest Churches of Christ or most well-known Churches of Christ have an instrumental worship service. So they just have separate services. So they'll do like the earlier service is a cappella, and then their later service has instruments now.
So
Uh,
that feels more cultural than doctrinal. And the reason why I say I just
yeah.
brought this up in my interview with Scott McKnight, which is sometimes, and I believe that the older generation, they protect doctrine well.
Hmm.
And I want to, if you're listening to this and you're in the builder culture, I appreciate how committed people have remained to the, the things that relate to salvation, baptism, things
Hmm.
like that. Sometimes, as we become safeguards of of doctrine, we also begin to safeguard culture.
Right.
And the next generation, I think, pushes back
Yeah.
against some of the protection around culture because you can't elevate that to doctrine
Right.
and then sell that in the scriptures. And I do think sometimes ideologically we encounter something in our culture, our society, we form an ideology and then we kind of reverse engineer a theology around it.
Right.
And we do that with a lot of things. And I'm guilty of doing it too. So I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I can assure you that.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes, to your point, we come up with a need or we come up with a perspective and then we just adapt our hermeneutic around it and we
Yeah.
start to explain it in a way, at times aggressively. We can
Yeah.
aggressively sort of insinuate that, no, this is sin.
Right.
No, that's just a difference in culture. There's a
Especially if it's an
difference.
opinion matter. Like let's choose our battles. Yeah.
Oh, but I didn't know that it's not as much of an issue. So
It's
I
becoming
don't know.
less and less, at least in my experience. If somebody's listening to this and they've seen something differently, I'm seeing within the Churches of Christ. I'm talking the mainstream Churches of Christ. They're not fighting on that hill as much anymore. But I will say this though. I really appreciate. So I was um, some of the early songs that I wrote were in an a cappella setting. So like "Be with Me, Lord," or "I Need Your
Mm,
Love," or some of these songs
mm.
I wrote for a cappella, and then we I can't remember exactly what happened, but we had some retreat or something, and I couldn't get the part singer. What we used to do is have the part singers, and each person has a mic and stuff, and that was the way we always did worship. And we had already started to do instrumental, but it would be like a performance, like Greg Martzke, who was my campus minister back when I was in college.
Wow.
Wrote a lot of songs, but they were like a performance song, not a everybody's singing
Yeah.
congregational song. So there was sort of a differentiation. Nobody really said that, but it was just like that. And but then we had this one retreat, and I couldn't get the part singer, so I was like, I'm just gonna play my guitar with these songs, and people loved it. So then I started playing guitar with these hymns and stuff, kind of making my own versions of them or whatever, and adding in some instruments and and for sure our churches have become largely more and more and more instrumental. The thing that I'll say to guard against or watch out for when you do make that when you have the instruments, you bring with it more opportunities for issues because you've got to have a certain level of expertise. You've
Mm.
got to have expertise when it comes to sound and mixing. Um, there's a real tendency for things to get too loud, I feel like, and you lose the voice of the church. Like I
Wow.
always want to be hearing everybody sing, and I've been in some church situations, especially like kind of evangelical church situations, where it's so loud I can't even hear myself sing. And it's like I want to make sure we always hear the church, hear the voice of voices around us. Now that's an opinion matter. It's not, I can't say, that's a scriptural matter. it's a doctrinal matter, but preference. I love to hear, and coming out of the Church of Christ, coming out of an a cappella background, that's a real gem that we want to hold on to. Even like singing in harmonies and things like that. Like that's kind of unique to hear harmonies, and there's something about that, and and so there are people who like lament the loss of that. Like we used to
Mm.
be known for our harmonies and our part singing and all that.
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, you're right. I mean, and let's keep that. Let's how can we keep that? And but let's also not these young people that are just moved by these like elevation worship songs are like we why should we say no we're not gonna bring that in either, like let's just have both. So if we can have both, I want to have both or have it all, have an eclectic approach.
That's what I want. I heard a woman, named Naomi Walters. She's a professor at Rochester, and it's kinda weird. On one hand, she's a Church of Christ daughter, and she preaches. She believes in her gift of being able to preach. But on another hand, she's fairly conservative when it comes to instrumentation. Now, would she say that using instruments is sin and so forth? No, but one thing she brought up that has stuck with me, and this is like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. She said there's something about when you're singing, you mentioned a moment ago that you can't even hear yourself, let alone one another, and the voice of the church is lost. And she said when people are singing a cappella and they're listening to one another, there is an intimacy there. There's
Yeah.
a receiving and there's a connection.
Yeah, for sure.
And I got to be honest, it's weird. We pretty much use the band for 99%, but there are times where it's just the people.
Hmm.
And thank you for making songs that are a cappella, man. Those I Need Your Love. Oh my goodness. Oh, that just brought up so many emotions.
Mm,
Like, oh my goodness, like, oh, just this sort of wellspring of, oh, I remember. I
mm,
remember hearing everyone. I remember, and then very slowly, at least because I got baptized in '01, very slowly instrumentation became more of a standard.
yeah.
But I do think there's something sacred about you and I. Like, I'm a bass. I sang
Mm,
in junior high and high school, and so I got a
awesome.
deep voice, man. Yeah. But I love when we hear. Sometimes when I'm singing, Brian, I'll just shut up so I can hear everybody else.
Yeah, me too.
I do that, and sometimes that ministers to me more than if I'm singing.
Yeah,
Um, Sometimes if I'm really overwhelmed, I can't even sing. I just have to be.
yeah,
So it's almost like we're all co-laborers when we worship. Everyone's doing their part, and we don't even realize how we're ministering to one another when we're doing it.
yeah.
But
That's right.
going back to this idea of using overdoing instruments, overdoing the performative aspect of it, that I think is part of what people are pushing back against with the Hillsong model. Or and not to
Hmm.
pick on Hillsong, right? But it's this 1-2 punch right now, Brian, where
Yeah,
you get them with the worship and then you hit them with the sermon. It's this 1-2. You got to get, and you nowadays it's like you got to be competitive. Like I didn't realize this until a couple years ago. There are churches who will hire professionals
yeah,
for Sundays. That's what they do. I
yeah.
didn't know that.
There's a church in our area that like the most prominent church in our area that actually there's a big shakedown in the leadership of that area. But one of the problems with this new pastor that came in, he just hired outside people and didn't use anybody from within the own congregation. And the people that he hired, some of them weren't even believers. So they're singing these and they're the top 10, the elevation worship, the Hillsong, the top songs, but they're singing it for hire and they're not even believers. It's just like, and so their board in that church was pushing back against that, and it caused that, among other things, caused a rift in this huge mega church congregation in our area. And that guy left and started a new church. And but anyway, it's a real thing. I see where it comes from. You want it to be excellent, but you're you know and I think there's a pushback against that. I honestly think younger people, there's a real hunger, and with my people my kids' age, there's a hunger for authenticity, and I think
Mhm.
this megachurch model that was sort of big, it's crumbling. I mean, I'm sure you've
Mm.
listened to the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. I ate up that podcast. I just loved it so much because it just made me feel like, okay, some of the things in our church, well, they weren't that bad, or it's just we're part of a bigger thing, right? We're part of a bigger thing of what God is doing amongst these different churches, and I feel like there's a spiritual battle going on, or there's just big cultural streams, and so this mega church thing, and the church I'm a part of, at one point we did state, I mean, we want to build a mega church in LA, and that changed pretty quickly, and it's the congregation I'm with every Sunday. We're part of the LA Church of Christ, but it's 200 people on a Sunday, so it's you can see everybody, you can know everybody, you can meet everybody. It's not like this where it's so big it's you don't know people anymore. So
Mhm.
it's more like on a given Sunday, there's more like, I don't know, 150 people there, 170 people. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's just a perfect size. I feel like that's kind of the perfect size. But I think we're seeing this. Some of these churches, like the what's the name of the group? It's within the Churches of Christ. Mental lapse here. There's these churches in the South that they're new churches. They're all young people, or a lot of young people. They're kind of like starting new churches within the Churches of Christ, but they're doing different things. Like, for example, communion is very interactive, and they're talking about, let's whatever there'll be a question given, and then there's just split up into groups and let's talk about it. It's just very like communal, and not so performative or like from the
Yeah.
stage. It's like, and I think that is there's a hunger for that, this authenticity, right?
Mhm.
You ask young people, what's their biggest critique of the church? It's a lack of authenticity, and and uh, and so people are wanting authenticity, and I think you get that when you simplify, when you have smaller gatherings, when you know what I mean, when you're trying to build a mega church,
Absolutely. Yep.
you just lose a lot of authenticity and you lose a lot of the connection.
Oh,
So
I wanna ask you now, what are you working on? And if we have time, I actually wanna, do an off the record, question for you, but,
sure.
what are you working on? What are you up to?
Um, well, that album I mentioned, "Wait for the Lord, My Soul." I'm trying to. I finished that right before I got sick, and so I never really promoted it. So um, part of why I wanted to talk to you was just even letting people know about it. Letting your audience know about that album. Nowadays, I don't burn CDs anymore. It's just you put it, you upload it to the world, and then you get it through whatever streaming service you use, iTunes um, or whatever it is, that you use, Spotify. Most people nowadays. So I'm trying to like build some videos for that, some like worship lyric videos that people can use in their services if they want, or just meditating on their own or whatever. But then when I was, I told you when I was putting that album together, I had kind of a bunch of songs that sort of fit two categories. So one was like I'm talking about the songs I wrote during the lockdown that were sort of, or even during kind of wrestling with some mental illness stuff, that are sort of more introspective, more wait for the Lord, waiting on God kind of songs, quiet. And so that's what this album is. But then I had this whole other bucket of songs that just didn't fit those that's big and loud. And because I've been doing youth camp for like 12 years, 13 years, something like that, a long time, where we go up to the mountains, and with a bunch of campers, you want loud, high energy, jumping around, kinds of songs. And so I had a bunch of songs I'd written for that. Um, and then some other kind of congregational songs that are more upbeat. Uh, I feel like we need more sort of home and heaven type songs, or simple
Mhm.
to sing kind of songs. Because I that's one critique I have of some of the newer songs coming out of Maverick City or Elevation, or the top songs that are coming out right now. I love them, Phil Wickham, but they all have like an octave jump, and they all have some of them are easy to sing. A lot of them are not easy to sing. I mean, if you just listen to what the church is doing, they're either not singing or they're having a hard time. They really highlight. They're great to listen to. They're just hard to sing. And so I feel like one of the things I've always been passionate about is writing really songs that are easy to sing. And so that's where I even pitch them lower than maybe where I could sing. But um, but I'm trying to make it something that people can sing.
Mhm.
So this new album I'm working on, I'm not sure if it's going to be called. I'm not sure what the name of it's going to be, but it's going to be those kind of camp songs, those upbeat, high energy songs, and then some more easy to sing songs that are simple.
I love it, brother. And let me just say, this has been even more of a blessing, probably than before if we would have done the interview. And I don't say that in terms of wishing any harm on you or anyone else, but what I know is that when someone loves God, his spirit is in them, they are, I mean, truly an overcomer. And
Hmm.
God takes us through everything. And that's what he does. And he never fails. And so I'm just grateful to have you on. I want to say to you what I say to all my guests, that we are with you. And bro, we are with you. And
Amen.
God is for you, my brother. Thank you for joining us today.
Amen. I appreciate that. You too. God is definitely with you, and I really appreciate all your audience as well. And my sister being one of them, and
Yes.
she's the one that first introduced me to your work,
Yeah.
and a long time ago. So really appreciate the impact you're having in her life, and our whole family's life. And so keep on doing what you're doing.
Oh, dude, Holly is, I mean, I probably get emotional if I talk about her too much, but like, dude, she has been one of the biggest gifts I could honestly even, I didn't know she was there. I didn't
Mhm.
know there was a Holly. But dude, your sister has been, oh my gosh, she has become a friend. She is my director of communications, bro. Dude, she is amazing.
Amen.
I'm
Yes.
so grateful. So, anyways, I thank you for your time. If you've been watching through this entire episode, I want to thank you for your time,
Yeah.
and I will see you next time. Take care.